40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, we are here in Evanston, Illinois after a 52-3 Ohio State win over Northwestern. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'm joined here with Keaton Maisano, and Braden Moles is back in Columbus holding down BuckeyeGrove.com's home fort. Let's just jump right into the game. And Keaton, since you're here with me, I'll have you go first. Just your overall impressions on what we saw tonight.
I was very impressed with what Justin Fields was able to do with his arm tonight. I mean, he broke his six-game streak of a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown today, but he was able to do a lot of things with his arm, 4 passing touchdowns, really good connection with Olave, which we've seen a few times this season. And Olave looked very well polished running his routes. And then defensively, I think this didn't look like the most dominant performance for Ohio State, but then you look up at the scoreboard and Northwestern only is able to muster up 3 points, and they also held them to under 200 yards of total offense. I mean, I think the standard has definitely changed for Ohio State's defense to when this felt almost like a game where they were getting gashed a little bit on the ground, but they were able to still correct it and still hold Northwestern to below 160 rushing yards and just really dominated the game after the first couple of drives.
Yeah, Braden, you had a little bit of a different view at watching it on TV. Just your impressions, because you get the benefit of some replays and things that we don't necessarily get to see as easily here in the press box. We're kind of in the midst of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting watching on TV because they arguably look more impressive on TV. So, I mean, you're getting to see the plays develop downfield, and it's just, we've seen this in pretty much every game this season. It's become more apparent as the season has gone on how efficient this team is. I mean, Fields going 18 of 23, all the running backs with getting a significant amount of carries, averaging over 6 yards per carry, 5 receivers averaging over 10 yards per reception. Everybody is really efficient, and it goes to show how well they're executing in basically every part of the team this season.
Right. I mean, Ohio State kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start, only putting up 7 points in the first quarter. Northwestern put up its only points in the first quarter as well, and then the second quarter rolls along, and Ohio State puts up 24 points. It's just kind of been standard operating procedure for them this season, really outside of the first game, that the second quarter really seems to be where they kind of find, their rhythm, if you will.
Yeah, and it just really kind of feels like you're just waiting for that avalanche to hit. I mean, Ohio State has a good first quarter almost. They had a good first drive, but kind of slowed down a little bit after that. But then you're just waiting, and then it feels like once they get that first score, then they get the next one and the next one, and then defense helps them out, and then there's the special teams blunder, and it just, as quickly as this game began, it can end for an opponent against Ohio State. And the second quarter has been when Ohio State's been doing their damage, and they continued it against Northwestern.
And like I said in our What We Learned piece that came out right after the game, if Ohio State treated every game like a 60-minute second quarter, they would be the greatest team in college football history, bar none. Now, while they unfortunately can't do that, it's just been really impressive how that, even when they're looking a little, they're struggling a bit in the first quarter, they're all in every single game this season. They've been able to turn things around going into the second quarter. So it's a testament to Day and the coaches he's brought in to how well they're able to make adjustments on the fly and basically end every game, by the end of the first half this season.
Talking about adjustments, they had to make some personnel adjustments in this game. No Baron Browning. They had to start Nick Petit-Frere at tackle. Thayer Munford did come in later in the game, played a couple series there, but it really was an MPF type of game. Obviously, with Wisconsin coming up, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, I mean, they had to make some adjustments on the fly, just the physicality of the season, even coming off of an open week like they did, whether a guy gets rolled up on in practice or whatever happens there at that point, you just kind of have to roll with the guys you got.
Yeah, and I think MPF came in. I think he kind of struggled a little bit at the beginning with the holding call, and he just didn't seem like he was exactly there, but then they put Mumford in, and then I think MPF got settled down because that Mumford showed a really gritty performance from him, and I think Ryan Day even commended him for that. But then MPF comes back in, looks good, and then really just the depth. You can see it with Ohio State, and it's impressive even when the second string come in or the third string guys come in. they're able to keep up that same kind of momentum that the first stringers left off with. And even just being down on the field, you can see how excited the first team guys are to watch these guys perform. And you can just tell that there's a chemistry with this team, and there's a mindset of toughness that they're going to continue through all of these players. And I think Ryan Day is really building a cohesion of this team that's really impressive. And if they can keep this going, and even in the games that get a little bit tougher, they can turn to some guys who you haven't seen as much to, and they can trust those guys.
Yeah, I mean, even with that, like Keaton said, that toughness mentality, it's also the mentality of that next man up that they talk about. I mean, with Baron Browning injured and Thayer Munford and even Damon Arnett going out of the point because of I believe they said post-game that he had wrist surgery over the off week. But yeah, all the backups are able to come in and do a really great job of continuing and kind of keeping up with the pace that the first team is setting. So, I mean, yeah, any of those guys coming in for any of those injured players, especially on the offensive line, which we saw in the second half with, Master Teague's big run, Marcus Crowley's big run, everybody's able to come in and keep playing at that high level that the first team is setting.
We'll talk about a couple of individual performances here in a second, but let's pay some bills with our great sponsor, Hague Water Conditioning. Hague Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back here to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. Let's talk about the offensive side. J.K. Dobbins, 18 carries, 121 yards, had a 68-yard run in there, 6.7-yard average. After the game, he wasn't overly impressed with his own game. He said that there's still a lot out there, a lot more that he can do. But, what he's been able to do, I mean, this has been a very different back than what we saw last year. And, early in the game, a lot of little short runs and whatnot, and then he busts that one open. And I think Ohio State finally was able to just break through that wall finally because, I mean, let's be real. The Northwestern, run defense had been pretty solid this year. I mean, the defense in general had been pretty solid, but it took Ohio State a little bit of time to find that success.
Yeah, they really contained Ohio State pretty well to start the game until that 68-yard run by J.K. Dobbins, and I think that kind of just shows the new mindset of J.K. Dobbins. He's going to run tough, and he's going to wait for his chance. I think that's what he understands being the number one guy, that he doesn't have to hit the home run right away. He can be patient. He can let the game come to him, and then those big plays will come. And it came for him, and then the other running backs came in and did the same thing. And I think it just really – you can't talk about the running game unless you talk about this offensive line. I think the offensive line, just like the Michigan State game, they had to adjust to the toughness that Northwestern and Michigan State were going to bring. And after they adjusted, they started opening up the holes and let their dynamic running backs do the work that they are able to do. And they showed it again today against another good run defense. And if they can do that against Wisconsin and against the other good defense they'll play going forward, they'll have a lot of success offensively and maybe as a team, and they could do really anything they want to do.
I don't think it's necessarily a surprise, though, that J.K. Dobbins is disappointed with his performance. I mean, even last season he had over 1,000 yards, but going into this season during fall camp, he was talking about how he viewed last season as a failure. So I don't know if J.K. Dobbins is ever going to be impressed with his performance, but it was still another nice game for him today. But, I mean, do consider if you take out that 168-yard run, he would only have had 53 yards on 17 carries, 3.1 yards per carry. So maybe he does have something saying that, he wasn't as impressed with that performance. But just overall, another great day for the running backs. And seeing that big playability from Master Teague and Marcus Crowley on those 73-yard and 53-yard runs, respectively. So it's just another nice day overall. And like Keaton said, the offensive line, even with the injuries they're dealing with, rotating guys in, doing a really nice job of opening up lanes for them.
Right. Ohio State finished with 279 yards, with 96 yards with Master Teague after that 73-yarder, and Marcus Crowley had 53 on, a 53-yard run, then he had another run for no gain. So, I mean, obviously impressive there in the run game. In the pass game, Justin Fields not lighting it up in terms of yardage, but once again, you sit there and you look at the final tally, 4 touchdowns. I mean, 18 of 23 for a $194, sacked once, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He did have a kind of botched exchange where he ended up falling on the ball. I mean, he actually had to really hustle to get to the ball and fall on top of it. But, overall, Another solid performance by Justin Fields is, he continues to put up numbers, kept out of the end zone this game, first game with the Buckeyes. He did not have a rushing touchdown, but, overall, thoughts on Justin Fields.
If you watch these games and what he's doing, you would think he's a fifth-year senior on the field. He's been through it all, but you got to remind yourself, this guy's a true sophomore. That was his 7th start all time, and he's looking so poised out there. And statistically, threw for 4 touchdowns, but he's just impressive with his decision-making. He's not putting the ball in harm's way. He's making the right decisions. He's throwing the ball away. There was times where he was able to show off his, insane ability to elude the rush and extend the play. I think on a 3rd and 15, he found KJ Hill for a first down, which just, everyone's jaws are just on the ground because that play is – the defense that they drew up was perfect, and they were able to, looks like they were going to get a stop, get off the field, but he's able to extend it, make the play, and keep the drive alive. And he's just making great decisions. His accuracy was on point today. He had 78% completion percentage, the 2nd highest of the season. And he's just really consistent with what he's bringing to the table every single week, and I think that's really helping Ryan Day be able to draw up an offense and just know that he can go to that well anytime he wants with Justin Fields.
And I agree. He's definitely been consistent, and like I said, he's been, as efficient as ever today. And I think that, he kept showing abilities today that are becoming more commonplace for Ohio State's offense. That playmaking ability he has to escape the, it almost reminds me of a Patrick Mahomes type player where anytime he gets out of the pocket on a 3rd and long, you're like, oh, well, that's going to be a touchdown, because every time that's happening, he's able to make this amazing play, whether it's, getting past the rusher or, throwing across his body, whatever it may be. He's making some really impressive plays, and it just seems to be becoming easier for him every single week.
Obviously, everybody went into this game talking about how the Northwestern defense, very solid defense out there, how they kept Wisconsin to, well off of their season marks in a 24-15 type of game. I don't even remember off the top of my head at this point. Everybody wanted to talk about how the Ohio State offense and the Northwestern defense would be, but, conversely, looking at Ohio State's defense, they hold Northwestern to 3. We're not talking about any sort of offensive juggernaut when it comes to the Cats. They certainly had their struggles. They were able to have some success in this game. They were able to break off some decent runs. I mean, they never really had any of those chunk plays that we saw all too common last year, but they were able to have some runs. They were able to move the chain some. But, all in all, Ohio State did what they needed to do on the defensive side of the ball, held them to 3 points, forced a couple turnovers, just did the things that top teams need to do in these types of games.
Yeah, and I mean, they looked dominant most of the games this season, the defense, and this game maybe not as suffocating as the previous games, but the most important stat is what the team puts on the scoreboard, and they put up 3 points. So no matter how you are able to hold a team to as few points as possible, then that's good enough. And Ohio State was able to do that. They had a little bit of a bend, not break kind of mentality to start the game when they were getting gashed up the middle the first play because they only had 10 guys on the field, as Ryan Day joked. But the defense has just been consistent. They avoiding the chunk plays that were consistently hurting them last year. And if you make an offense stay on the field longer and make them execute more plays, there's a better chance that they're going to make a misstep or you're going to make a great play. So Ohio State's defense, Jeff Hafley said, he's just about eliminating the explosive plays, making a team earn their points. If they're able to march down the field and get a touchdown or get a field goal, then you shake their hand and you play the next drive. So Ohio State's been able to do that so far, and they'll look to continue to do that going forward.
I think even against the most inept offense, we haven't seen that yet because Ohio State hasn't played Rutgers yet, but 42 yards, holding any quarterback 42 yards is a great accomplishment. They picked Aiden Smith off once, and had a couple of dropped interceptions. So just like Keaton said, a suffocating performance from them. And then they had some of those big gains by the running backs in the first quarter, but after that they were able to lock things down. So their longest play of the day, it looks like it was a 16-yard run by a handful of Wildcats, but beyond that, they weren't giving up those chunk plays, and overall, just another great performance from the defense.
And now the Buckeyes get to celebrate this win for about the length of the flight home, get to sleep, have, a night's sleep, and then it's on to Wisconsin. And, with this being a Friday night game, we haven't had the benefit of watching Wisconsin play this weekend. But, I think we know who they are. I think we know what they're about. They're not playing anybody of consequence this week, and it's going to set up a big one for next week.
Yeah, this is the game that I think after maybe the third week after Wisconsin dismantled Michigan is the game that I think every Big Ten fan had circled on their schedule as this is the game that we're really going to see how these two teams really match up against each other and how they match up against top-flight opponents in the country. I mean, Wisconsin's got one of the best running backs, one of the best players in the entire country in Jonathan Taylor, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Ohio State's run defense matches up against Jonathan Taylor. Ohio State's historically done very well against Wisconsin running backs and shutting them down, but teams past Wisconsin, the old Wisconsin teams, they didn't have a quarterback like Jack Cohn who's playing actually decently well this year, who's being able to manage the game. So in the past, they've not been able to rely on a quarterback before, but I think Cohn's been able to show enough where you got to respect at least that element of Wisconsin's offense, and then defensively might be the strength of their entire team. And it's going to be very interesting to see what their approach is to try to limit Ohio State's offense, what they'll try to take away. And it's going to be a very intriguing game because it's almost like an unstoppable force meeting up against an immovable object in this one. And it's going to be really interesting to see how these two teams play against one another and just the kind of the style of the game that it takes place.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost hard to, you can't really overstate how big a game this is. I mean, this is potentially the second biggest regular season matchup that's going to happen this year, but behind LSU and Bama here in a few weeks. But, I think defensively for Wisconsin, I think Ohio State has done well this season against some of the top defense they played, like Michigan State and Northwestern. So, like Keaton said, it'll be interesting to see how they match up against them, especially on the offensive side of the ball against Jonathan Taylor. And so, while obviously you want Ryan Day and the defense to do their due diligence on Jonathan Taylor, I would say that the big concern for Ohio State may be Jack Cohn because they have not played a premier quarterback this season. Not to say that Cohn is a premier quarterback by any means, but he may be the best quarterback they've played this season. So it'll be interesting to see how the defense responds to a better passing situation than probably they've played it all this season.
And I don't want to get us too far down the rabbit hole in talking about this game. This is supposed to be the Rapid Reaction podcast. We're not supposed to go too far, or actually the BIA podcast. I'm sorry, going back to the old name. So I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I'll say that I think Jack Cohn is more of a game manager. I mean, he has a very talented receiver out there with Quintez Cephas, who did not, who was ineligible last year. I mean, had some legal issues, got cleared, back on the team now at this point. I don't know if Jack Cohn is going to be a guy that can go out there and make the plays to beat you, but I also believe that he's not going to be a guy that's going to go out there and be a liability like some of these other quarterbacks that we've seen go against Ohio State. I'm not even going to pick on anybody by name at this point, but we've seen guys just not help their own causes going against the Buckeyes and this defense. So it'll be really interesting to see just, the matchups of styles and to see, how Ryan Day really prepares for the first game that's supposed to be a test that I think that actually will be a test. Michigan State didn't end up being that test. Nebraska certainly didn't end up being that test. Fortunately for this Buckeyes team, the game's going to be in Columbus. We'll do a little speed round here, final thoughts, and then we'll call it a night. Keaton?
Just really impressed how Ohio State came off the open week, really focused, took care of business against Northwestern. The game was sandwiched right between open week and the biggest game of the year right now for Ohio State and Wisconsin. So just an impressive performance on both sides of the ball and just really intrigued to see how they perform against a well-rounded Wisconsin squad.
Yeah, I mean, the train just kind of keeps on rolling. It's hard to come up with different ways to say that this is a very good team, but I'll say it again, this is a very good team, and they can match up with any team in the country, including Wisconsin, who will come to Ohio Stadium next week.
Yeah, I'm excited about that game, but, we'll all be back in Columbus tomorrow in time to watch that Penn State-Michigan game tomorrow night. I'm really excited about seeing that one. I think that's going to really tell the story about, Ohio State plays them in the final 2 weeks of the season, Penn State at home and then at Michigan. I think getting a chance to see these two teams go against each other, we'll learn a lot about both of them. One team, if Michigan loses, they have two conference losses. Their path to winning the East is about gone at that point. If Michigan's able to prevail, which the odds makers aren't buying, with Penn State being about a 9-point favorite or so, everything gets a little bit more interesting at that point, and Ohio State is sitting there with a game in hand over everybody in terms of where we're at. But, plenty of time to talk about that on Buckeye Grove this week. I'm going to wrap things up here. I want to thank Keaton. I want to thank Braden. And, be sure to listen to every episode here at the BIA podcast. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at buckeyegrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.